Hello everyone, I'm Shuang Wenting. Today we are going to learn how to write Chinese characters with a writing brush and then appreciate some famous Chinese calligraphy works. My lecture is composed of 4 parts. Now let's begin from part 1. The writing tools of Chinese characters. 4 treasuries of a Chinese study. The 4 treasuries of a Chinese study refer to writing brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. First of all, let's take a look at the Chinese writing brush. This is a writing brush. This is the ink. This is the paper for writing Chinese calligraphy. And this is an inkstone. Their production process and history will be shown in a video in part 3. Now let's move on to part 2. The basic strokes of Chinese characters. The 5 most common strokes of Chinese characters. Horizontal stroke, vertical stroke, left downward stroke, right downward stroke, dot stroke. Now, we are going to learn the basic strokes of Chinese characters. They are the basic elements for the construction of Chinese characters. Such elements can be further divided into basic strokes and derived strokes. There are 8 basic strokes, namely horizontal stroke, vertical stroke, left downward stroke, right downward stroke, dot stroke, upward slant stroke, turning stroke, and hook stroke. Other strokes are derived from different combinations of these 8 strokes, and each Chinese character has a fixed number of strokes. Today, I will briefly introduce the writing of the 5 most common strokes of Chinese characters. The horizontal stroke, the vertical stroke, the left downward stroke, the right downward stroke, and the dot stroke. The horizontal stroke going from left to right. Now, practice the writing of this stroke after me. For you. Its writing includes the following few steps. Press the brush down at A at about 45-degree angle. Move the brush rightward towards B. After B, move the brush slightly upward towards C. At C, press down and move the brush at an angle of about 45 degrees until D. On reaching D, make a small U-turn towards E, gradually lifting the brush off the paper. Please follow me. Online students can write it down on a piece of paper and then send a picture of it to us from the internet. Okay, next, the vertical stroke. Going straight from top to bottom. Now we are going to write the vertical stroke. Its writing includes the following few steps. Press down the brush at A at an angle of about 45 degrees so that the bottom of the brush reaches B. Move the brush downwards towards C. At C, press down and move your brush at an angle of about 45 degrees towards D. At D, make a small U-turn upwards towards E, gradually lifting the brush off the paper. Please follow me. The vertical stroke has another style. Its writing, relatively easy, includes the following few steps. Press down the brush at A at an angle of about 45 degrees so that the bottom of the brush reaches B. Move the brush downwards towards C. At C, press down and move your brush towards D, gradually lifting the brush off the paper so as to form a pointed ending. Okay, let's practice the writing of this stroke. Okay, next, the left downward stroke. This stroke goes from top right to bottom left, and it should curve like an arc on the left. Now we are going to write the left downward stroke. Its writing includes the following few steps. Press down the brush at A. Move the brush downwards towards B. After B, move the brush downwards and leftwards to C. gradually lifting the brush off the paper so as to form a curved, pointed ending. Now practice by yourself. Next, the right downward stroke. It should curve like an arc on the right. Now we are going to write this stroke. The writing of the stroke includes the following few steps. Start lightly at A. Move down and right towards B, gradually putting more pressure on the brush. Exert the greatest pressure at C and pause slightly. Change the direction of the brush by making the slope increasingly gentle and gradually lift the brush rightwards to make a pointed ending at D. Now practice this stroke after me. Next, the dot stroke. This stroke is a very short one, which goes from top left to bottom right, or from top right to bottom left. Now, let's write the dot stroke, which goes from top left to bottom right. Its writing includes the following few steps. Start from the upper left corner, A. Press down and move the brush at an angle of about 45 degrees until it reaches B. Begin a U-turn at B towards D by way of C, gradually lifting the brush off the paper. Next, let's come to the basic structure of Chinese character strokes. So far, we have already learned a few basic strokes of Chinese characters. Now, let's look at some simple Chinese characters. They are all made up of the simplest horizontal strokes, vertical strokes, left downward strokes, and right downward strokes, such as 忍, 土, 公. What's the difference between them? 忍 is composed of a left downward stroke and a right downward stroke, but the left downward stroke is longer and higher than the right downward stroke. 土 is composed of 2 horizontal strokes and 1 vertical stroke. Please note that the bottom horizontal is longer than the other, and that the vertical only crosses the short horizontal. 公 looks quite similar to 土, but the difference is obvious. The vertical only collects the 2 horizontals inside, but does not cross them. Practice writing 忍 after me. Next, I will introduce the 3 spatial relations of Chinese strokes: separation, collection, and intersection. First, separation. Separation means that there is no direct contact between 2 laboring strokes, such as 八. Attention, write a left downward stroke first, and then a right downward stroke, keeping some distance between the 2 strokes. Now, let's come to collection. Collection means that two strokes join but do not intersect, such as 人 and 上. Look at the character 人. The two strokes meet here. Let's write. Great. The next character we are going to write is 上. It has 3 strokes. The first stroke is the vertical, and the second and the third are both horizontals. Notice that the second stroke begins from the midpoint of the vertical stroke. The two strokes connect but do not cross. The third stroke appears at the bottom. It connects but does not cross the vertical. Let's move on to intersection. Intersection means that two strokes cross, such as 时 and 大. Let me write 时. Write a horizontal stroke first, and then a vertical stroke. The relationship between strokes is very important. If you make a mistake, the characters will be completely wrong, and the meanings can be quite different. Next, turning stroke and hook stroke. Now I will introduce two other strokes, namely the turning stroke and the hook stroke. The turning stroke can be divided into horizontal turning and vertical turning, both of which are to be finished in one stroke. For the horizontal turning, first write a horizontal line from left to right, and then turn downward to form a vertical line. For the vertical turning, first write a vertical line from top to bottom, and then turn right to form a horizontal line. the writing of the hook stroke. After finishing a stroke, turn the direction, lifting the brush lightly to bring out a hook, which can take on different shapes as the direction varies. When writing the horizontal hook, we write a horizontal stroke first, and then turn the brush down left at the end of the stroke, gradually lifting the brush to form a hook. To write a vertical hook, we first write a vertical stroke and then turn the brush up left at the end of the stroke, gradually lifting it to form a hook. A crook hook looks a lot like a vertical hook, but it is not straight. It is like a burnt human. This kind of a hook forms in a similar way as that of a vertical hook. A diagonal hook is like a man with his back against a wall, so the hook is outward. A lying hook is just like a person lying on the ground. Let's look at the following characters to find out the strokes we have learned. 买 includes a horizontal hook. 水 includes a vertical hook. Jia includes a crook hook. Hua includes a diagonal hook. And Xin includes a line hook. Part 3, a video about the 4 treasures in a Chinese study. After learning the basic strokes, let's have a look at what the 4 treasures in a Chinese study are. As has been mentioned, the 4 treasures in a Chinese study include 4 tools: brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. Let's watch a video.
文房四宝。文房即书房，四宝指的是毛笔、黑墨、宣纸、砚台，是古代文人著书写字一刻也离不了的文具，因此被称为文房四宝。毛笔是劳动人民在生产实践中发明的，是中国传统的书写与绘画工具。虽然现在有了更好用的铅笔、钢笔， 但毛笔并未退出历史舞台，而且用毛笔写字成为一种艺术创作——书法。黑墨是制成块状的黑色颜料，在砚台里倒一点水，用黑墨能磨出写字用的墨汁，然后用毛笔在宣纸上写字绘画。宣纸产自安徽省宣城市，因此叫宣纸，是中国特有的手工艺品，质地绵韧光洁，不怕虫蛀也不腐烂。用宣纸题字作画，层次清晰，浓淡相宜。中国的国画山水画如果没有宣纸，那会失色很多。
Now let's come to the last part of my lecture. Part 4. Chinese character writing practice. The characters we are going to write include 汉字, 武汉, 中国. 汉字. Let's first learn to write 汉字. Hanzi is a Chinese word, meaning Chinese character. This word is composed of two characters, namely Han and Zi. We are going to write Han first. Han is a Chinese character of left-right structure. For Chinese characters of such kind of structure, we always write the left strokes first, and then the right ones. The left strokes of Han include two dots and an upward slant. When we write these three strokes, we normally follow the rule of writing from top to bottom. We should write the upper dot first, and then the lower dot, which should be a little more to the left than the upper dot. And then we write the upward slant. Please watch my writing. After finishing the left strokes, we begin the right strokes. The right part is composed of two strokes, namely a horizontal starting left downward stroke and a right downward stroke. Please watch my writing. The second Chinese character we are going to write is Zi, which is of an upper-lower structure. For such characters, we always write the upper strokes first, and then the lower ones. The upper part of Zi includes three strokes, namely two dots and a horizontal hook. Its lower part is also composed of three strokes, namely a horizontal hook, a vertical hook, and a horizontal. Please watch my writing. Next, we are going to write Wuhan. It is a place name, the capital of central China's Hubei province. It is also the city where Wuhan University of Science and Technology is located. Let's first look at the writing of the character Wu. It is the Chinese character of semi-enclosed structure and is composed of 8 strokes, namely horizontal stroke, horizontal stroke, vertical stroke, horizontal stroke, vertical stroke, upward slant stroke, diagonal hook, dot stroke. The first stroke is a horizontal one, quite short. The second stroke is also a horizontal one, but longer than the first one. The third stroke is a vertical one, which begins somewhere to the left of the midpoint of the long horizontal stroke, so that the 2 strokes are collected but do not cross. The fourth stroke is the horizontal one, which begins from the midpoint of the third stroke, namely the vertical stroke. The 2 strokes connect but do not cross. The fifth stroke is also a vertical one, which appears to the left of and is also shorter than the fourth stroke, namely the vertical stroke near the middle of the character. The sixth stroke is an upward slant, which holds the bottom ends of the 2 vertical strokes and collects with them without crossing them. The seventh stroke is the diagonal hook on the right. It should cross the second vertical stroke. The last stroke is the dot. It should be written on the upper right corner of the character. So far, we have finished the Chinese character Wu. The writing of Han has already been taught. I'm not going to repeat it now. Next, we are going to write 中国. 中国 is a Chinese word which means China. We'll first write 中. This character is composed of 4 strokes: a vertical stroke, a horizontal turning stroke, a horizontal stroke, and another vertical stroke. 国 is more complicated than 中. It is a structurally fully enclosed Chinese character. Fully enclosed Chinese characters refer to those whose outside part is a square and whose inside part is another Chinese character. For such characters, we always write its outside part first, except for the last stroke, namely the bottom horizontal stroke. Then the inside part, and lastly the bottom horizontal stroke to finish the enclosure. The Chinese character 国 has 8 strokes. The outside 2 strokes come first. The first stroke is a horizontal one, and the second is a horizontal turning stroke. Next, we are going to write the inside strokes, which form another Chinese character 玉. Its first stroke is a horizontal one, so is the second. The third stroke is a vertical one, and the fourth stroke is again a horizontal one. Please note that the 3 horizontal strokes vary in length. The lower horizontal stroke is the longest. The upper horizontal stroke is a little bit shorter, and the horizontal stroke in the middle is the shortest. Remember that the vertical stroke crosses only the middle horizontal stroke and connects the other 2 horizontals. The last stroke of the inside part is a dot. Now we have a final stroke to write to finish the character. It is the bottom horizontal stroke, which answers the purpose of a full enclosure. So much for the basic strokes of Chinese characters. Next, let's welcome Professor Li Shaofeng, who will guide us to appreciate 2 famous Chinese calligraphy works. Now, Professor Li.
Thank you, Professor Strong. I would like to greet everyone in the audience. I'm honored at your interest. I hope my short introduction to Chinese calligraphy opens up a better appreciation of this unique art for you. Everyone who has been to China would have noticed how omnipresent written words are in everyday life there. Shop signs, couplets on doors, slogans with big characters. We can see Chinese characters beautifully written almost everywhere. Anyone who starts to learn Chinese would soon be introduced to the rules of writing words, the order of the strokes, the structure of the characters. It is one thing to write Chinese characters well, but it's another to appreciate or practice calligraphy as a form of art. Although the two are closely related, they are different. Calligraphy is a visual art related to writing. It is the design and execution of lettering with a pen, ink brush, or another writing instrument. After seeing some examples, you will notice the big difference between Chinese and Western calligraphy. Western calligraphy tends to emphasize regularity, mainly in the way of arranging circles, curves, straight and horizontal lines. We often see ornaments in the initials. Strictly speaking, they are not part of the writing text, but a decoration. Chinese calligraphic art, on the other hand, has a big variety of styles. Going through a collection of calligraphic artworks, you will see some of the works are written thick and strong, some slender and graceful, some swift, some soothing, some rounded, some square. The main reason for this difference is that Western calligraphy is limited by the number of letters, and all of which are written from left to right, whereas Chinese characters have their origin in pictograms. They are made of a variety of strokes written in imaginary squares, either from right to left or from top to bottom. We all know that the use of different tools has an impact on the development of art. The main tools of Chinese calligraphy are the so-called four treasures of the literati study: brush, ink, paper, or ink, and inkstone. Brushes were made by binding animal hairs of rabbit, chicken, wolf, or even boar bristles to a shaft, often made of a section of a bamboo branch. To produce inkstick, we first mix soot with a binder. The mixture is then put into a mold and dried up. Inkstone were carved from stone and then polished. And in China, the making of inkstone was itself an art. Paper was already in use in China in the 3rd century BC. The major improvement made by Cai Lun of the Eastern Han Dynasty in about 100 AD was an important event in the history of paper making. The paper commonly used in Chinese calligraphy is the so-called xuan paper. Xuan paper consists of two basic materials: sandalwood bark fiber and straw fiber. Paper made in this way permeates water very well. So in a piece of water-absorbing paper, a certain speed is needed in the writing process. People who encountered a piece of Chinese writing for the first time would not fail to notice the uniqueness of the Chinese writing system. The reason is that most characters are based on pictographic elements. The earliest Chinese characters we can now see are the inscriptions on bones or turtles' shells for oracle purpose, 甲骨文. Later, it gradually developed into a writing system that combined pictographs with character paths, which signify sound and meaning. The early seal script, 篆书, often used curved strokes. Around the 3rd century, a new style of writing for official documents was gradually formed, the official script, 隶书. From this, the script we now commonly use is developed, the regular script, 楷书, which is the most familiar form of Chinese writing. It is also the form of writing that students who are new to calligraphy are firstly exposed to. The basic strokes, some say there are 28, others believe it should be 41, organized in an imaginary square. Traditionally, only 8 strokes are considered to be the most common ones in the study of calligraphy. Known as 8-stroke Yong, as there are 8 basic strokes contained in the Yong character, horizontal, vertical, dot, and so on. A typical calligraphic course usually starts with practicing the basic strokes of the regular script, then gradually learn the various combinations of strokes, and then learning to write individual characters, and then writing lines of Chinese characters. Later on, the effort then extends to writing practice in different styles. In the first stage of practicing calligraphy, a student usually gets a copy of steady rubbing to use as a model for copying by Yan Zhenqing, a great master from the Tang Dynasty. Why then should Yan Zhenqing's style have become the standard? One of the main reasons is that his way of writing supposed embodies the Confucian ideals of gentleman quality: loyal, dutiful, upright, and gentle. His regular, steady writing was thought to be the perfect presentation of these qualities of Confucian official, or a dignity in ancient China. In an imperial exam, by the way, good handwriting would determine one's career. Yan Zhenqing's life can be described as a typical Confucian scholar of official. He received a good traditional education in his early years and later took the imperial examination and began his career as an official. Although he served 4 emperors and reached high ranks, even as Minister of Justice, and was given the title of Duke of Lu, his career was not smooth. He was removed from his position several times. The reason, we are told, were his uprightness and outspokenness. He was finally executed in 785 at the age of 74 by the leader of a rebellion. Yan Zhenqing was revered by generations of Chinese scholars for his personality as well as his calligraphy. That is still the case today. This writing, especially in the regular style, was the object of imitation. They show qualities like regularity and steadiness, qualities sought by Confucian scholar officials. In the history of calligraphy, Yan's art is commonly divided into three periods. The early one, when his style took shape by the age of 54, the middle period when it matured, and the late period from the age of 64 onwards. What is notable here is how many years it takes for calligraphy to develop a style of his own. A significant example of Yan Zhenqing's art is the piece of so-called draft of a requiem to my nephew, Jiming. Yan Zhenqing's nephew, a loyalist to the Tang court, died in battle during the Anlushan rebellion. Yan wrote this masterwork of calligraphy with sweet strokes in a state of extreme grief and anger. The text consists of 13 lines and contains 268 characters, of which 34 has been crossed out. The author's agitated state of emotion seemed to be responded at the tip of his brush. The line flowed like rushing river that cascade away. Each stroke appears to come from the inner being of Yan and his very emotion. There are many dry written parts in the work, as if they were a concrete expression of the calligraphy's grief and sadness, which give the composition a bold and cold style. The whole work is written in the so-called running or cursive style, 行书, which was commonly used for private correspondence or personal writing. This is the translation of the text, and I would like to go through a special part where the emotion is very obvious. This part. You have the normal characters, the regular characters beside it, so you might be able to figure out some characters here. My selfless older brother so loved me that he asked you to send words to me. You had already returned home, and Tuming Pass was conquered. With the opening of Tuming Pass, the villains feared they would be pressed on all sides. A treacherous official failed the rescue, and so the orphanated city was besieged and compelled to submit. The father was taken and the son killed. The nest tipped and the egg overturned. So you can see the Fu, the father, was then crossed outward, and Xian was taken, and the son, another strong character, killed. So the full emotion is to read in this piece of calligraphy. The pinnacle of Chinese calligraphy, however, is considered to be the work of Wang Xizhi. One of these works is known as the first cursive script in the world, which means that it's even more highly regarded than the previous work by Yan. Unfortunately, the original is lost. Throughout history, many copies were made of Wang Xizhi's famous work, 兰亭集序. Some believed that the original was buried in Emperor Taizong of Tang in his mausoleum. This Tang Dynasty copy by Feng Chengxu is considered the best of all the extant copies. It is now in the Palace Museum in Beijing. With its natural fluidity, Wang's calligraphy differs significantly from Yan's. Here we have the impression that the writer must have been in a very different mood. In May of the year 353, a party was held in a private garden in South China, where a group of high literati enjoyed the good weather of the last months of spring. This gathering at the Orchid Pavilion become perhaps the most famous party in the whole cultural history of China. Wang Xizhi, the greatest calligraphy of the day, wrote the preface to a collection of poems written of those present at the gathering. The poems are no longer frequently read, but this preface remains one of the masterpieces of Chinese calligraphy as well as literature. The pleasure of the moment was the dominant theme of this writing, but in Wang Xizhi's hand, this motif was transformed. A melancholy reflection of the impermanence of life permeates the whole work. The text begins, in the year 353, the 9th year of the Yonghe reign, early in the last month of spring, there was a gathering at the Orchid Pavilion on the northern slope of the Kuaiji Mountains. Our purpose to carry out the spring ceremonies of purification. Many good men came, the young and old alike. The place was one of mighty mountains and towering ridges covered with lush forests and tall bamboos, where a clear stream with swirling edges cast back a sparkling light upon both shores. From this, we cut a winding channel in which to flow our wine cups, and around this everyone took their appointed seats. True, we did not have the harps and flutes of a great feast, but a cup of wine and a song serve well enough to free our most hidden feelings. Unlike the previous work, each stroke here appears free and fluid. The emotion is calm and the stroke flow gently and naturally. Just one example, the 20 zhi characters that appear in the body of one's work, together with the one Zhi character in the signature, make a total of 21 Zhi characters, each with a different form and aesthetic, none of which are identical, all written in different ways. Like different notes of music, they play their part in different contextual relationships, and the whole work is as beautiful and moving as a piece of chamber music, inflecting generations of people who understand the art of calligraphy. The art of Chinese calligraphy is a form of self-expression and self-cultivation. The style is thought to reveal the person behind the written words. Next to the quality of form beauty, the expressiveness of the whole piece should be the focus of any aesthetic judgment. To appreciate the art of Chinese calligraphy, it is inevitable to get familiar with the Chinese writing system. Even better, to learn to read Chinese well. Finally, the more knowledge of the history of calligraphy you have, the more you will enjoy the different style of writing, and the more the individual characteristics of a master will reveal to you. Each piece of work by each calligrapher will have different story to tell. Thank you.